Hey guys, Lancer here. Hope everyone's doing well. So, I just wanted to have a quick update on reserveless cards and try to work around them from the other side. We know that good reserveless cards are spiking, and they seem to be spiking without almost any limit in the last couple of days. And they have been spiking ever since all of the QE that was released around the world and all the stimulus checks that have been sent out. So, aside from that, I was looking at what the worst reserve list cards are. So I've got about 10 of them, and I'm pretty sure I can find hundreds. There are so many subpar cards, cardboard pieces of paper, that would not be worth putting in almost any deck. They might look nice sitting on the top of a cabinet and saying that you have this card, but they are absolute trash in most cases. When you think about them as reserve list cards, all of a sudden that changes tune. Whether or not that means that they actually hold value, it's going to be hard to tell. So let's start with the first one. So I just wanted to see what these cards have been doing, and like some of these cards, it's hard to get a jump on them because they're already spiked and are on their way down. That just shows how much of a craze these already are. But let's have a look at Rainbow Veil. So Rainbow Veil, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Control of Rainbow Veil passes to your opponent at the end of the turn. You tap it to do this. It enters the battlefield. You can tap it for any color, but then you immediately pass it to an opponent, and it goes around the table. Now this is interesting. This is like a group hug card that can help you on the turn it comes out, but it's still absolute trash when you compare it to all the stuff that's out there now. It is on the reserve list. It peaked to $19 on the, this is on the average, but I care about the market. That's pretty much what actually sold, what's been listed, where I can buy it now. And you know, I'm not going to make any opinions of these. I'm going to let everyone decide on if this is actually worth the money or not. These are all reserve list cards. You know, if we're going to go just by reserve list status, they might all be worth infinite amount of money because they're never going to be printed again, depending on the supply. There might be hundreds hidden in Rudy's basement. We'd never know. He may never get them out. Actually, I think for something like this, he would dig until he finds out, especially if it spikes to any crazy numbers. But we'll see what happens. So, Rainbow Veil. The next one is Wood Elemental. 3 colorless, 1 green. Elemental. The stars in the lower right-hand corners are set to number of untapped forests you sacrifice when Wood Elemental is brought into play. It unramps you, and you had to sacrifice a large number of untapped forests for it to have any value. I'm not too sure exactly how good this card ever could be, unless you had maybe a graveyard themed deck, which is then going to bring back all of those forests into play. Now think about it, that actually sounds kind of cool. But it's already spiking in just the last couple of days to $21 from a market low of 12 after its recent previous spike. It's on the reserve list, and is it worth it? I don't know. Continue on. You got Soros Path. It is a land. You can tap it, exchange 2 of the opponent's blocking creatures. This exchange may not cause an illegal block. Soros Path does 2 damage to you and 2 damage to each creature you control whenever it is tapped. This card is strange. It works in weird ways just because of the fact that you cannot cause an illegal block. So it doesn't help you as much as you think. And the fact that it deals damage to you and all your creatures whenever it's tapped seems like a big problem. I can see it working in maybe an enraged deck or a deck where you want to take damage. I can see it working wherever you want to like confuse the opponents or you want to mess around with the board. But is it worth $9? It from a market low of $3 just last year. It's on the reserve list and it's still spiking. So I'm not too sure what it's worth. It's on the reserve list. This one is insane. This has been talked about a lot. These spikes are crazy. The artwork's pretty cool, I guess, but I'll read the card. North Star, 4 colors, 4 tap. You may cast 1 spell this turn by paying its casting cost with any type of mana. For example, 2 and 2 green becomes 4. However, the card still retains its original color. This ability is played as an interrupt. This is interesting. The only problem is it itself does not tap for any mana, which means you're paying 4 extra mana to make another card that's going to come into play colorless for its casting cost. So if you have a 4 color card that's in your hand and you have 4 forests, you can't play that. If you have 8 forests, then you can play that. If it's a blue, red, white, and black card, you can tap this, tap your 4 forests on top of your other 4, whatever, I assume forests, and you can play that. Is it worth, I mean, it peaked at some point at 90, but is it worth $35? That's a good question. I don't know. It's on the reserve list. Another one, Nameless Race. So Nameless Race, it has trample. Pay star life is when you bring in Nameless Race into play. Effects that prevent or redirect damage may not be used to counter this loss of life. When Nameless Race is brought into play, star may not be greater than the total number of white cards in all opponents have in play and their graveyards. This card is so specific. I assume it was useful at some point in time, but I have no idea when. But the biggest thing is, it used to be $2. Now it's peaking at $8.24. It's on the reserve list. It hasn't spiked like all the other crazy reserve list cards. But is it worth it? Like, it can sit on the cabinet. I assume you can play it if you know that the rest of your group is going to bring white cards in. If there's a guy playing mono white, I guess you have a chance. But then it also, I mean, how many items creatures and cards do you normally put into play and in the graveyard unless you're in cycling, and then you're in white, so I don't know. But once again, it's a reserve list card. So Apocalypse Chime. So this one's a weird one. It peaked at some point and then it's dropped back. It's trying to go back up slowly over time. Apocalypse Chime. 2 colors, artifact. 2, tap, sacrifice Apocalypse Chime to bury all cards from the Homelands expansion. It's a different font as well. That's hilarious. But it's a very specific card. I don't know how many people play with Homeland expansions. How many people even know that they exist. And what set symbol they are. I can't off the top of my head tell it. Reserve list card. And it's worth $3. Actually, this one I think I think it might just be trash. I can't see where it's gonna fit. Moving on, Typhoon. 2 colorless, 1 green, sorcery. Typhoon does 1 damage to each opponent for each land or island he or she controls. This is interesting. Now, it's not probably worth $16 or an average of 38 or whatever it's spiked to in the past. But it's an interesting card, and you know, if someone's playing a control deck, I guess you'll never be able to cast this card, but it'll be good to, like, you know, deal 10 damage to them out of nowhere since they have 10 swamps, 10 islands. But is it worth the $16 average that it is now, slowly growing back up, and you know, the peaks and spikes it's had in the past? Next, Autumn Willow. 4 colorless, 2 green, summon legend. Cannot be the target of spells or effects, not bad. Pay 1 green, target player may target Autumn Willow with spells or effects until end of turn. This is interesting. I mean, it's not strong at all. I mean, this is back when creatures were not meant to be strong compared to the spells. But it's not the worst. The only problem is paying green in a multicolored deck so that you can pay green and pay an extra mana to then target to then remove it. It's not a very powerful creature by itself, but anything that has hexproof is usually not too bad in Commander, but then you got board wipes. It's actually quite cheap for what it is, but I can see it starting to spike in the last like 2 or 3 days. I'm not too sure where the interest came from, but yeah, it's a pretty cheap reserve list card actually. Another one, imminent Implements of Sacrifice. 2 colorless, artifact. 1, tap, sacrifice Implements of Sacrifice to add 2 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. It costs 2. You pay 1, you tap it. It's 1 mana too much for what it should do. This one is actually interesting because it saves. It's kind of like a bad ramp. It's like the worst ramp that you can get. You pay 2 mana to put it into play. It goes away at the end of it, and you can only tap and sacrifice it to get 2 mana of the same 1 color. But it is one of the cheapest reserve list cards I've seen. It's 66 cents. And yeah, it's bad. You probably don't want to do it very often. But if you have an artifact deck or, some deck that needs the ramp, there's better ways to do it. But, it's a reserve list card. That's probably the cheapest that I've seen. And the last one, Beldrain of Singier. Beldrain of Singier, 5 colorless, 2 black. Expensive. Summon Legend. That's pretty cool. 5/5. Pay 1 colorless, 2 black. He gains Forest Walk and -3/-0 until end of turn. This is interesting. He's a legendary card. I think he's looks kind of interesting. The art's interesting. For the card he is, for it to be on the reserve list, for 52 cents. Huh. Yeah, that's cheaper than some rares. I mean, of course, but some bad rares nowadays. So, I don't know what you can actually find them for. I'm just going to do a quick check to see if there's any broken... Yeah, okay. You can pick them up for 28 cents, moderately played. Yeah, near mint, $1. I don't know if there's any crazy things. Yeah, this guy's pretty cheap for a reserve list card. So I'll let you guys decide on which ones to keep, which ones to think about. Let me know in the comments if you think any of these are actually worth their price. Some of them are just too cheap to not get, I guess, but they probably have a huge supply in the back end. Really ready to sell for like even 28 cents by the looks of it. But you guys let me know. Thanks for watching and have a good one. See ya.